Mike Muse is an industrial engineer, a music executive, a political architect. He breaks down the intersection of politics and pop culture. This is the Mike Muse Show.
What's up, brother? It's your boy, Mike Muse. Welcome to the conversation, the Mike Muse Show. I am so excited to be in conversation with you. A happy weekend, everyone. I hope you guys have had an amazing week. It was a lot to get through, but we made it. I got to be honest with you. This is my first time speaking with you all since coming back from the National Football College Championship game presented by AT&T. And I have to say, for the first time ever, I was not conflicted on who to root for, but I didn't want to root for either team. There's this idea narrative that you root for the lesser of two evils, or you just want to see a great game. But in this instance, as a University of Michigan alum, seeing Ohio State in the national championship game along with Notre Dame, I couldn't have been more angry at this position because neither team deserved to be there. Yes, I said it. Neither team deserved to be there. And let me tell you why. Ohio State, you guys have raised your banner with this national championship game, but let me tell you something, my people. You guys have an asterisk next to your name. I said it, an asterisk next to your name. The reason why is you didn't beat us. You didn't beat Michigan. So the idea that you could win a national championship without beating Michigan is preposterous. And I think this is why we need to get rid of the 12-team playoff system, because clearly everybody's getting a trophy, and based upon your seed, you could win a national championship. You guys didn't deserve to be there. Second, Notre Dame. You guys also didn't deserve to be there. Another entry in the 12-team playoff because everyone gets a ribbon, everyone gets a participation trophy. You guys need to be in a conference. Until you guys are able to be in a conference, you should not be allowed to be in the national championship game, nor in the 12-team playoff. If so, I think whoever you're playing, whatever conference you're playing, you have to prorate your earnings based upon what that team would earn if they had to share the prize with the entire conference. It's just not fair. Also, you guys, Notre Dame, you don't have the burden of having to compete for a conference championship game. The next thing, you guys can gamify your schedule because you don't have to play in conference. So you can pick and choose whatever team you think is more beatable. I mean, you guys did lose to Northern Illinois, which is insane that you guys were still in a national championship game. No one's going to say it, but I am going to say it. You didn't deserve to be there. And then another thing, like when it comes to that, we need to talk about whether or not there's strength of schedule and what that relates to. Because a lot of conferences and a lot of schools who really want to compete with the national championship game, they've always been told that a lot of it has been based upon their strength of schedule. And so if the strength of schedule is going to be not a factor, then you're going to see a gamification of other schools starting to gamify their schedule, because Notre Dame gamifies their schedule so that they can have an easier path of victory and to have a lower losses on their end of the year total. So that is why those two schools should not have been there. I've never been more disappointed in a college championship game having to sit in the stands and watch two teams who didn't deserve it. In Ohio State, you got lucky again. You almost lost. I mean, literally, you almost lost again. I don't know what happened with those final minutes remaining and how Notre Dame can throw that interception and allow Ohio State to win that game. But again, Ohio State, your national championship banner that you have, it should come with an asterisk because you did not beat Michigan. I will say this, though. I would like to have the Notre Dame-Michigan games back at night. Those are absolutely killers. Speaking of at night, AT&T, man, they kind of owned the weekend of fun. There was a concert by Lil Wayne. I thought it was a really good concert and a performance. And the whole time, the reason I wanted to highlight it is because the whole time I kept thinking about he had a point to prove because he was very upset he did not get picked for the NFL halftime performance in New Orleans. We all know Kendrick Lamar, shout out to K. Dot, got the look, and some people want Lil Wayne there. And I feel like he really had a point to prove. He had us waiting for a little while, but nonetheless, it was a sold-out crowd waiting, chanting his name. And I thought it was really special that he brought out his whole family. And for me, that signaled that how much that performance meant to him. And I have a feeling that Lil Wayne going forward is not going to take any concert for granted. He won't take any chance he has to get to perform in front of a sold-out crowd for granted based upon how he had his whole family out there. And Gucci Mane, y'all, Gucci Mane got hits. I actually forgot how many hits Gucci Mane has. Hit after hit after hit after hit. And Quavo, the hometown crowd, Atlanta, they turned up for Quavo as he was the opening act. Anytime you have Quavo as opening act, you know that concert is going to be fire. Another thing, speaking of fire, I didn't really anticipate. Camila Cabello, she has a huge fan base. I did not realize how engaged and enthusiastic her fans were at the AT&T live concert experience. She closed out the second night, and when I tell you, her fans had T-shirts, they made signs, they knew every word, and that was my first time, honestly, having a close view of the fans of Camila, and they love her. And she delivered a great performance. All in all, it was a great time hanging out for the weekend at the AT&T Live Concert Experience, and then also to the National Championship game. What a time it was ultimately, but man, it was hard being around so many Buckeyes and Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Listen, I've talked trash about y'all enough. I need to move on. But just remember, and I'm always going to make you guys remember for the rest of the year until that Saturday in November, you will always have an asterisk by your banner because why? You did not beat Michigan this year. How does that feel? All right.
Now that I've come in hot about college football, we are done for the college football conversations until the spring games happen in April. So I'll give you a break until April, until we get to the spring games, and then I'm going to be all over this story. With that being said, go blue one more time before that. But listen, I just want to get into a conversation about some of the latest developments between President Trump and his executive orders. But really quickly, just for programming aspect, after this conversation about birthright and birthright citizenship, right on the other side, I'm so excited to have Jimmy Jam on the show today. That's right, Jimmy Jam is going to be on the show today. Returning guest. He's a friend to the show, friend to me. I'm super excited. I just want to get into a really cool conversation about one of my favorite Janet Jackson albums, which is called Janet, and to really figure out the behind the scenes and what was happening behind so many big records off of that album. So yeah, anyways, plus a bunch of other things. You know, Jimmy Jam is always good for a good story. But all right, let's just go ahead and get into it, you guys. President Trump's executive orders attempting to end birthright citizenship. But yesterday, there was a new development in the story. The Trump administration, in defending the order, has questioned the citizenship of Native Americans under the 14th Amendment. Want me to say that again? Can you say that 10 times fast? The Trump administration has questioned the citizenship of Native Americans under the 14th Amendment. That's right. Native Americans who have long been recognized as United States citizens are now finding their status placed under scrutiny by the Department of Justice as part of Trump's broader plan to narrow birthright citizenship. The idea that these individuals who are indigenous to this land were here first until they were colonized and taken over by those who landed here in the States, that after all these years in 2025, we would question their right to citizenship here in America. It goes to what I've been talking about in the sense of the underlying thesis and of what this immigration reform is about from the Republican Party, particularly from President Trump, and this idea of othering and this idea of who belongs in America and like what is an American. There's just something really interesting about the co-opting of patriotism, like who is a patriot. There's something really interesting about the co-opting of religion and Christianity and Jesus and evangelical Christians. So there's just been this idea of almost like a purity test that I feel that we're getting to that level of, particularly when you begin to question citizenship of Native American. I saw a lot of things coming down the pipeline from President Trump. I'm not shocked by a lot of things from President Trump. I'm just prepared for the next 4 years just to handle what he throws out and then just do my best to analyze it for you all. But I gotta say, folks, I didn't see this one coming, where we'll question Native Americans' citizenship. But today we're going to center on Trump, on why Trump wants to exclude certain groups, including Native Americans, from automatic citizenship. The legal and historical context, I'm going to break down a birthright citizenship. You guys know I'm a big fan of history. And I think it's important that we break down this history in order to have a fuller context of the immigration debate that is happening. But I want to quickly recap what birthright citizenship is and how it has functioned in the United States for more than a century. You know, under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, which was ratified in, I believe it was 1868. It says, quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside, end quote. So for generations, we've taken this to mean that if you're born here, you're an American. That's it. Plain and simple, folks. Historically, this has been a bedrock principle of American citizenship, reinforced by the Supreme Court in cases such as United States versus Wong Kim Ark, and that was in 1898. I know many of you have never heard of that, but that ruling affirmed that a person born on U.S. soil, provided that they are not the child of foreign diplomats, becomes a citizen at birth, regardless of the parents' nationalities or immigration status. The 14th Amendment, I don't know if people really are familiar with this, but it was originally designed to ensure that formerly enslaved Black Americans will be recognized as full citizens. But it also established a broader principle, a person's right to U.S. citizenship by virtue of being born on U.S. soil. Now, President Trump's executive order aims to challenge that tradition. President Trump wants to make citizenship available only to children born to U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents. This will be a dramatic departure, folks, from our long-held practice, moving the United States into a more restrictive category that few other countries occupy, particularly those in the Americas. Again, picking and choosing who is American, who's qualified to be American. And what's even more shocking about this immigration debate that I've always found troubling is that America is made up of a country of immigrants. Unless you are Native American, unless you've been indigenous to this land, you are an immigrant. And so the idea that we are now in 2025 trying to determine who is and who isn't is just really shocking and appalling to me. President Trump argues that the phrase, quote, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, end quote, in the 14th Amendment means more than just being physically present under U.S. law. In other words, his administration claims that undocumented immigrants and now shockingly possible sub-Native Americans fall outside that jurisdiction. So I kind of want to take up the legal aspect of this because, legally speaking, the vast majority of constitutional scholars believe that the Supreme Court has been pretty clear. If you're born here, you're subject to our laws, and therefore you're under U.S. jurisdiction. Even so, we've already seen lawsuit folks move through the federal courts challenging Trump's executive order. A federal judge appointed by President Ronald Reagan temporarily blocked the order from taking effect, calling it blatantly unconstitutional. But Trump and his administration, they're not letting up. The Justice Department is making a pointed case that goes all the way back to the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Can you believe we're having this discussion already within the first full week of him being in office? The Civil Rights Act of 1868, which included the line, quote, excluding Indians not taxed, end quote, from automatic citizenship. They're also referring to a 19th century Supreme Court case, L versus Wilkins in 1884, which at the time found that because Native Americans owed allegiance to their tribes, they were not considered fully under U.S. jurisdiction. Of course, that was all before Congress passed the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924. And that Citizenship Act of 1924, folks, what it did was that it granted citizenship to all Native Americans born in the United States. The question that remains now is why bring up these old legal precedents now? What is Trump hoping to achieve by potentially excluding Native Americans, a group has long been recognized as citizens? I personally think that it has to do a lot with him wanting to drill more, particularly drill more on tribal nations. I think it's also has to do with not wanting to support, tribal lands, wanting to possibly take back tribal lands, and what does that look like underneath the Department of Interior? So there's just a lot of questions that are out there than there are actually answers for, because historically the phrase excluding Indians not taxed was used in the 19th century to create a distinction between Native American nations who had treaties and separate governance structures and the broader U.S. populace. Native Americans often lived on reservations were not considered part of the state or federal tax system. They exist kind of in that in-between place. But over time, laws changed, and the Indian Citizenship of 1924 formally recognized that Native Americans born in the United States are indeed United States citizens. The Trump administration's latest argument, however, resurrects these old distinctions. The Department of Justice suggests that because Native Americans had historically been considered outside the United States jurisdiction, it proves that merely being born on U.S. soil does not automatically confer citizenship. They then extend the logic to children born to undocumented immigrants or temporary visa holders, arguing that if Native Americans historically weren't considered under the jurisdiction, the children of permanent residents or undocumented immigrants shouldn't be either, which blows me away. Yeah, I've been thinking about this reasoning, and I'm trying to think about the broader implications aspect of it. Just not from people from other countries, but for the sovereignty and the rights of Native American tribes today. As you know, citizens, I always have and think about Native Americans and indigenous communities. I remember having Secretary Deb Haaland, who was the former Secretary of Interior, and I was excited to have her because that was really the first time that a Native American was in charge of an agency that worked in collaborations of tribal nations and into working to ensure that there was a bridge, if you will, between the federal government and these tribal nations. I've always done conversations around the artificial intelligence, as you may recall, a conversation we had a few weeks ago, or maybe a couple of months ago now, maybe, where I talked about how facial recognition can be dangerous, but at the same time, facial recognition has been good at solving for missing persons who are indigenous women. They've had more success finding those. And so I've been really advocating a lot for the indigenous community, which is why I find this so troubling, and where we are and why we feel that we need to call into question the firm standing we believe Native Americans have as both tribal citizens and as American citizens. This raises a very important question. Why target Native Americans at all? One possibility is that by pointing to historical exclusions, the administration is trying to weaken the broader argument that the 14th Amendment unconditionally grants birthright citizenship. If the Department of Justice can say, well, we never included Indians in that, they can claim the right to exclude other groups too. It's a strategic legal maneuver. Rather than directly attacking the 14th Amendment head on, which courts are unlikely to overturn, they're trying to pick at its exceptions and interpretations from the 19th century. This is a controversial approach, one that many argue is flatly contradicted by modern law and well-established precedent. But if Trump's orders were to succeed, certain groups were excluded from birthright citizenship, the consequences could ripple throughout our society. For instance, there could be immediate questions about how individuals prove their citizenship, especially if there's no guaranteed path through birth on U.S. soil. You can see a dramatic shift in how vital records and documentations are issued, potentially increasing the burden on citizens to prove their status. And moreover, we could see changes in political representation. If a portion of the population, Native Americans, children of undocumented immigrants, or otherwise are not recognized as citizens, that could affect how congressional seats are appropriated. There's so much more to unpack about this, but as we think about this going into the weekend, should Trump's interpretation ever prevail, even partially, we could see hundreds of thousands of newborns each year who are not recognized as U.S. citizens. Let that sink in for a minute, people. That includes the possibility of large numbers of Native children facing new obstacles to prove a citizenship status that has been guaranteed since 1924. I think that's a good place for us to pause and take a break. All right, folks, because right there, I want you to get something to drink, get a cup of coffee, get some water, get a snack, get a piece of cake, get a cookie, whatever you may have. Because listen, on the other side, I am going to be in conversation with Jimmy Jam, and I cannot wait to unpack the Janet album and to really get into the mindset of what Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis was thinking as they were creating such incredible art with Janet Jackson and with other artists that they've worked with. So I cannot wait to get some behind-the-scenes stories with Jimmy Jam. Always a great guest on the Mike Muse Show, and always the most incredible storyteller that I ever had the chance to be in conversation with. So stay right there, folks. Be right back.